Hello, Simone. Today we are going to be talking about a study that came out recently titled "What Do Two Men Kissing and a Bucket of Maggots Have in Common? Heterosexual Men's Indistinguishable Salivary Amylase Response to Photos of Two Men Kissing and Disgusting Images." This is going to be one of those days where we're going to go a lot into disgust, sexuality, and point out that yet again, I called it. I called it. Everybody said that I was wrong. Everybody said my ideas were crazy. Now everyone agrees with all of my genius.
I think that Donald Trump, for some of his press conferences, has like an "I was right" hat.
Yes, this is my I was
And
right
I think
hat
you
moment.
need to put on your "I was right" hat. Yeah, we need one too.
We're going to win so much, you may even get tired of winning. And you'll say, please, please, it's too much winning. We can't take it anymore.
Am I ever going to get credit for being so effing right all the time?
No.
Is there ever going to be like the scientist? I love it that like with AIs, they literally coined the same term I coined, which was utility convergence. And they're like, so we found this weird thing in AIs where we get utility convergence and nobody predicted this in the space. And I'm like, I predicted it like literally 10 years ago. What are you talking about? I wrote many papers and things on this.
Yeah.
And this is something that in our, we talk a lot about human sexuality. I'd predicted this. And you're going to be shocked. You're going to be shocked by this, but it says a lot about one, how arousal and disgust work. And two, one of the big lies that progressives tell everyone about it. So to read part of the abstract here, participants in the current study viewed 6 different slideshows depicting same-sex PDA, that's public displays of affection or kissing, mixed-sex PDA, everyday items, and disgusting images. This is like bowls full of maggots, okay? While providing saliva samples in the lab. A series of paired sampled t-tests were performed and found that SAA, this is saliva amylase, which is produced by disgust responses, like neurologically, it triggers the release of this enzyme. Responses to images of same-sex men kissing and universally disgusting images were significantly greater than SAA responses to a slideshow depicting everyday items. So basically,
You so called it.
Hold on. It gets better. The results held across the full sample, regardless of individual level of prejudice, specifically prejudice against gay individuals. The results of the current study suggest that all individuals, not just highly sexually prejudiced individuals, experience psychological responses indicative of stress when witnessing male same-sex couple kissing.
No, wait, did they also try this on gay men?
Not in this study.
Oh.
The possibility of socialized disgust response to same-sex PDA is discussed. Basically, let me lay this out for people who didn't catch what this means. It means that the disgust reaction that we being most straight males have when watching two gay men kiss, which is a strong reaction. I've talked about it myself. And I could get blowback for this. Like I had a gay roommate all through high school, okay? Because I went to a boarding school in college. Like my best friends were gay. I hung out with gay people all the time. I am not like an anti-gay person. I have an extreme disgust to seeing men kissing men. Extreme disgust reaction. And what this is showing is that your acceptance of this is not tied to your disgust reaction. This has multiplicative downstream implications. The first being is that one, this disgust reaction is not socialized. This is not because of your religiosity or anything like this. Something that you are born with. It makes it much more likely that gay individuals, and I've noted this in the Pragmatist Guide to Sexuality, because I think one of the core mysteries of human sexuality is why male gayness does not appear like female human sexuality. It appears like an exact inversion of male straightness.
Yeah, it's not like so they're not sexual like a woman. They are gay. They're gay like a man. Yeah.
Yes. So what I mean by this is men, your average straight man, has an aversion, a disgust response at the idea of man kissing men. Like
Yes.
that grosses them out.
Yeah.
And they have an arousal response to the idea of, them kissing a woman. Sometimes they actually have a disgust response to seeing other men kiss women. We'll get into that later. But the point being, but they'll always have an arousal response to a woman kissing a woman. Basically, more guys in a situation, typically the worse it is for your average straight male. Now, this isn't always true, but the disgust reaction to gay men is coming. Women do not have this response. Women, it is actually fairly rare for a woman to have a disgust response to seeing two women kiss.
Yeah, I mean, welcome to the world of yaoi. That's
right.
Surprises no one.
Women who are consuming that. You mean two men kisses yaoi? Or,
I'm saying women are not turned off by men
right,
kissing.
but men are not turned off by seeing two women kiss.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Men,
No.
The point I'm making is women are not turned off by seeing two women kiss. They do not have this same disgust response. Seeing people of their gender kiss.
Which you also called, because women don't really orient. This is something that, so if you haven't checked this out, read The Pragmatist's Guide to Sexuality. In it, Malcolm posits that not only is sexuality oriented on an arousal to disgust spectrum, but also that men's or sexuality is more oriented around primary and secondary sexual characteristics like boobs and like things signaling.
That has very little to do with what we're talking about right now.
Well, but I'm just summarizing really quickly, and that women are not actually that attached to gender or sex. It's more about power dynamics.
Yes, more about dominance or submission. The dominance.
So they wouldn't. It doesn't really matter to them if it's like women on women, men on women, women on men. Like any mixture
is more tied to arousal than males. So one of the big mysteries of human sexuality is men, when they're born gay, do not appear to have the standard arousal pathway of a woman, which
honestly makes more sense, because that, I don't know, it just seems weird to me.
It doesn't make more sense. It's
really
weird. They appear to have an exact inversion, and you can see this when you survey gay men. Gay men actually, not as frequently as straight men, but fairly often have a disgust reaction to females. They have a disgust reaction to vaginas. They have a disgust reaction to breasts.
A lot of people have a disgust reaction.
A lot of people, but I'm pointing out that they have disgust reactions to females. That is effing. Why are they getting an inversion of a disgust reaction instead of the disgust reaction of the other gender? Like, it almost makes sense to me. I could be like,
no, it doesn't. It doesn't. This the way things are makes more sense to me, because if you develop as a male, you're developing like all of the mechanics of the sort of male sexual orientation. It just happens to be that there's a sign flip somewhere. That seems more simple to me and more likely than somehow you having like become exempt from all of the other elements of male sexuality.
Right. Well, this provides evidence for this, showing that the disgust reaction in males is biological or like inbuilt. Straight males.
Yeah. So this is much more proof of you are born gay.
Yes, it also adds evidence to the you are born gay or straight idea. If a male is having an active, and this is why I've said this, and males who may not have this response or males who may be gay don't understand, why can't you just power through it? The response my body has to males kissing is the response my body has to a bucket of maggots.
Like, why don't you just stick your dick into a bucket of maggots?
You can learn to like it. But what's important from our series, so people know this, is we argue that anything that has a disgust reaction, and it happens more frequently in males than females, can have a sign flip and accidentally become, due to something during our biological development, become an arousal pathway. So there is actually an entire fetish category called creepy crawlers tied to stuff like buckets of maggots being like poured on you and stuff like that. And we point out in the book that you do not see sign flips tied to any other response. You don't see sign flips tied to fire. You don't see sign flips tied to height. Anything else that has a strongly charged emotional response, you don't see a sign flip with an arousal response unless that response is disgust, like dead bodies, infants, all of the things that would cause disgust in a normal person. You're going to get some small portion of the population. And we also argue that the sign flip, the volume stays the same. So if you have a really high disgust towards something normally, the volume of arousal to that thing is going to be really high if you get a sign flip. But This also has implications for like progressive culture more broadly. So one, it adds evidence to the theories that we had that this is inbuilt and progressives were just lying when they're like, I don't get disgusted by this. But it also shows that when progressives, and I thought maybe progressives had like maybe somehow trained themselves, because like I've been like, you can't get rid of arousal patterns, but maybe you can't get rid of disgust. Well, no, I know you can't get rid of disgust patterns either if they're working on the same circuitry, but with a sign flip. That would mean that when progressives are like, well, thinking fat women are disgusting looking, which by the way, that's the reason there's a portion of men who are into fat women, because generally fat women create a disgust response, and anything that creates a disgust response, a small portion of the population is going to find arousing. But anyway, so women who are obese and create this, there is like this thing that's like, oh, well, you've only been socialized to feel that way. You don't actually, like, that's a cultural thing. And we see here, no, it's not a cultural thing. Now, here I note, and we talk about this in the book, is people will say, oh, well, aren't there cultures like random island cultures or wherever where like obesity in women is seen as an arousing thing? No, there are not. That is a complete fiction. Let me explain. There were cultures where it was reported that people chose wives who were more obese historically, but in every single instance, when they've gone back and measured those cultures after they became wealthy, that has disappeared and inverted. So what we were seeing there was just obesity being a indicator of wealth that was not correlated to the other parts of arousal. And so men were basically like, I'm choosing this woman because she's wealthier. There do not appear to be, and this is also, we've argued in other videos, that arousal likely is correlated to like, I'd say ethnic and cultural groups in a way. So it's not even like, it wouldn't even go against our theory that in some weird culture on some weird island, they had developed an arousal pathway that had evolved, right? And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. But it appears that this is such a strong signal that no culture has ever evolved a genuine sign flip on this at like a mainstream level, which is really fascinating.
I also imagine that a lot of these historical cultures that had interest in rotund women were just not emaciated women at this time, and they were seen as fat because, you know, wow, you can afford a few excess calories, and that meant that they were slightly more rounded than the average woman. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I don't think the level of overfeeding that we see today is as common. Though I also think that the sign flip issue that has led to fat enthusiasts today would have led to some in the past, and it could be that there were some fat enthusiasts in the past who are also
they're the famous fat enthusiast artists who a lot of people use to argue that like I wouldn't say it's starts with an R.
Rubens, isn't it?
Rubens, yeah. And it's very clear he had a fetish. Like the women who he chooses are the same one who fat fetishes choose.
I'm just Google imaging Peter Paul Rubens. And I'm looking at these images. Are they chubsters? Not by modern standards.
Not by modern standards, but his contemporaries talked about him as if he was a fetishist. And famous people can be fetishists. One of the things I always point out is...
Well, if he was a chubby chaser...
What was the famous Irish writer who liked women farting on him?
Oh, yes. Delightful
I like your cute little tootsies or whatever.
Yeah, the letters that he wrote to his lover. Just so...
what was his name again? This was...
God, we're so bad with names.
I'll find it in the post. But yeah, you see these in the past. That doesn't mean that they were normal. They were still very obviously minority arousal patterns. And we're not arguing that these minority arousal patterns are modern. I do find the issue, and we talked about this in another video, and it's something that like, you know what? I should ask Rock. But what is we've sort of debated on this. I assume that attraction to younger phenotypes is clustered in Japanese groups. Like that seems likely to me. There's some other ones you talked about, like attraction to like navels and armpits being clustered in Indian groups.
Yeah. There's gotta be a little bit of this going on, you know. It'd be weird if there wasn't.
But well, yeah, it would be weird if there wasn't. It would also be weird. So keep in mind where we talk about like where dominance and submission gets pulled into this is what we assume is dominance and submission cause arousal because it was just a system that the brain used for dominance and submission displays that humans do. Dominance and submission displays are used very frequently in animal species to signal social status. Not animal species, mammals, social mammals specifically. So think of a dog like showing it's ready to be mounted as a way of saying I'm submissive.
Yeah.
And we know that this isn't a female male thing, because in species where females are the dominant gender, like spotted hyenas, they actually develop something called a pseudopenis, which they can use an erection with to show when they're submissive. So in the same way, sometimes male animals will sort of prepare to be mounted as a way of showing submission to another male animal. Or female animal, even in cases in species where females are the dominant, erections are the way that you show submission, which I just find absolutely fascinating. Okay, so here's what Grok says on this.
Okay.
Research suggests that fetishes may have heritable components, with genetic factors contributing to about half of the variation in paraphilic interests.
Okay.
Include fetishes. The evidence leads towards a genetic influence, but environmental factors also play a significant role, and more research is needed for specific fetishes.
Well, most of your research indicated that environmental factors were not influential. Am I forgetting something?
They might mean influential in terms of like
Whether they
randomly
show them.
changing outcomes, not influential in like I saw this, therefore I developed X fetish.
Like,
way.
I'm sure a lot fewer people are gay when that means that you get thrown off a building, for example. That's an environmental factor.
No, but I mean, they're still gay. They're still like in the population.
Yeah, but maybe that's what Grok is talking about, though.
Studies on related sexual behaviors like PDA files show heritability estimates at 49%.
That's not surprising. No one would want to choose to have this arousal pathway.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm sure if you could get any of these people who have that arousal pathway the chance to undo it, they would undo it so fast.
Fetishes are specific sexual preferences, blah, blah, blah. Studies on paraphilias, which encompass fetishes, indicate a genetic component. For instance, a 2015 study in the Journal of Medicine found the heritability of sexual interest in youth was 49%, suggesting a significant role. A broader meta-analysis from Nature Genetics in 2015 reported the average heritability of 49% across many human traits, supporting the idea that sexual preferences might also be partially heritable. While direct studies on fetishes are limited, the evidence for paraphilias suggests that fetishes likely have a heritable component, though environmental factors like upbringing are also crucial. Disagree on that. Actually, in our studies on this, they were so shocking to us because I thought that at least like being abused pre-puberty would have an effect on people's adult arousal patterns. And in our data, basically nothing that happened to you, even sexual abuse, affected your adult arousal patterns significantly. They may suppress them a little bit, but that was it. Most of what affected your arousal patterns happened after or around puberty.
Yeah, I think in over the long term, in terms of another you were right thing, I think we're going to find that the heritability is higher than that 40% range presented.
Here's an interesting thing. An interesting finding is that in twin studies, which compare identical and fraternal twins, show higher similarities of paraphilic interests among identical twins, pointing to a genetic link, even though most research focuses on broader sexual orientation than specific fetishes. Well, I mean, this then would make fetishes less distant from the gay thing than people would say historically, because if you don't have a choice in what your fetishes are, especially if you're born with them, fascinating. Well, no, if you're born with them, then you can't say that being gay is any different from any other fetish.
Oh, I see your point.
So people
like, why do we have to be so accommodating of
the gays?
Like
we're not accommodating to foot fetishes, right? We're not accommodating to any other fetish category.
I think the bigger issue is that being gay is I think a very different kind of scenario, because it typically involves a disgust reaction to a very, very common social institution that until very recently was kind of a default setting for people. And being forced into that is really hard. It's not like foot fetishists were, also simultaneously disgusted by hands and forced to do, manicures every single day, right? So I think it's sort of a different level, and it has to do with major societal
I disagree. I think that there's a lot of fetishes that there is a real normalization around shaming people for having, even if they don't hurt anyone else. And that's really unfair when you consider that people say, well, for example, I find people like pathetic and gross who have like, I don't know, like a a maggots fetish. Remember I talked about like the creepy crawlies fetish, or like being farted on fetish, like James A. Joyce. That's who I think it was.
James Joyce. I think
James
you're
Joyce.
right. Yeah.
I find that like creepy, weird, and pathetic, and I can mock somebody for that in public. And somebody would say, well, it's okay because this causes a disgust response in most people. And then I would counter back. I'd be like, yeah, but so does two men kissing. So why does that get carved out as different than this getting carved out as different? Again, I'm not, I don't know how I feel across the board on this. I'm largely for people being like, look, if you have an unusual arousal pattern. I also wonder if communities, like, okay, consider something like this. Mormons, and we talked about this almost certainly in another episode, like the Mormon sharing partners thing, almost certainly have different arousal patterns than other populations due to their history of, one, how they recruited people, and two, polyamory. And I suspected that they likely have a lower disgust response to seeing their partners kiss other people because wives that had this response didn't have as many offspring likely. And that is why you see more Mormon partner sharing sort of things.
Oh yeah.
Where it's like, well, we share when we do everything but like the penetration or something, and therefore it's okay. So here's what I asked it next. I asked it for ethnically tied fetishes because I was like, is there any evidence for this? Oh, it's saying it can't find it, but it is saying that BDSM seems more common in Western countries such as Germany and the Netherlands.
BDSM strikes me as so white and also so German. Yeah,
it's so German.
It's extremely German.
And then you have the famous British Vice, which is a BDSM related thing, being submissive as a male.
More like school teacher spankings.
Very interesting. I love what Grok says. Regional observation studies like Ayla's survey suggest that BDSM. I love it. Just like name.
Well, I mean, Ayla's big on X. So
yeah. All right, hold on. I'm gonna see if I can find any other here. Evidence from cross-cultural studies. Research, for instance, a study from PMC on ethnic differences in sexual attitudes among U.S. college students found that Asians reported more conservative sexual attitudes compared to Euro-Americans and Hispanics, but did not address fetishes. Similarly, a study from HRAF on sexuality noted that societies vary widely in their tolerance of non-reproductive sex, but did not provide data on fetishes. A notable exception was Ayla's 2022 survey, which analyzed fetish preference by region, including North America, Western Europe, etc. The survey with 10,000 responses from some regions found that BDSM and age play were more popular in North America and Western Europe, while foot fetishes showed relative consistent prevalence across regions. However, this data is based on self-reported surveys, blah, blah, blah. Pretty much all sexual data is. I love when it like dismisses Ayla studies. I'm like, where do you think all this other data is coming from?
Yeah, come on. She has amazing sample sizes. Her selection bias is quite low because she sources outside of just people who follow her. She uses Positly to get really good representative audiences. Ayla does not get the credit she deserves. Someday.
Oh, this is interesting. BDSM accompanying bondage, discipline, everyone knows that. Okay. Bell's 2024 report of over 12,700 individuals found 86% of Americans had either tried BDSM or expressed interest.
Well, I mean, yeah, after 50 Shades of Grey taking off so much, can you be so surprised?
Well, yeah, I mean, 50 Shades of Grey, I think, showed that was in Europe and America. This is a normal arousal pattern in women.
They may not be getting it, but they want it.
We've had other videos on this where I like really get annoyed by the scary stuff on this. He thinks men are driving this. Whenever somebody's like, men want to abuse us, and I'm like, you can look at the data.
Yeah, men actually don't, because it's a lot of.
They actually don't. Well, so it's not that no men do. Actually, men do get aroused by hurting women, subjugating women, dominating women, but they do not get aroused by it as frequently as women get aroused by it.
Yeah, and the primary driver of demand for this, I think, is men. Is women. Women are the ones who are like, I want to see material like this. It shows up all the time in romance novels. These like power dynamics, these quasi-abusive relationships, these questionable behaviors. Like not even in a, what we would call like modern BDSM context in which the sub is ultimately the one with all the power, rules. So yeah, women actually don't even want that. They're like, no, don't do that.
That's
Be actually
really
more
fascinating.
What
Well,
is?
I wonder, like, I'd love for Ayla to do more on this to find out, like, because we've gone over the chart before from her that shows when paraphilias or fetishes age of onset is.
Uh-huh.
So that would be really interesting. I would guess that the age of onset of paraphilias likely correlates with how arousing they are. Actually, let's look up Ayla's age of onset of paraphilias chart. Gaps between trans and cis fetish onset. Oh, this is interesting. Here's a list of difference in years between. Okay, that's
Okay.
interesting.
What?
Age of onset. Okay, so if we're looking across here, which fetishes have earlier age of onset? Tattoos, body mod, skinniness, etc. Very young age of onset, 13.1. Body parts normal, non-genitals. So this is like knees, armpits, head hair, etc.
Okay.
But then other ones that have a very early age of onset are things like brutality and violence. This has an age of onset of 14.2. So that's really interesting. Incest has an early age of onset, 14.4. I could see that being hereditary because you do see it occurring more within certain subcultures.
Hmm.
And then some have very, I don't know. Interestingly, the latest age of onset is reproduction, pregnancy, surrogacy, oviposition, etc. 16.9 is when that starts.
That's interesting. There does seem to be a bigger ick reaction among adolescents to anything child related. So maybe that is connected. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm looking at these here, and this doesn't ring true for me that age of onset is connected to how hereditary it is. But maybe, I mean, it would make sense that incest arousal patterns in communities that relied on incest for reproduction would appear at a young age, because those communities would likely also begin engaging in sexuality at a younger age. But like reproduction almost certainly has some, like the people who get turned on by that, some correlation to genetics. I'd be pretty surprised if it didn't. And I'd also be pretty surprised if things like humiliation didn't, given, and that's one of the later ones, it's at 15.6. I'd also note that
I don't know. Humiliation just seems to me to be like one manifestation of interest in power dynamics, which is extremely pervasive.
Anyway, very, very interesting statistics there. And
You must be so satisfied to be validated in your research.
yeah, it's really cool that I make predictions years before they begin to become validated by the field, and then
Yes.
the field begins to validate them. And one day somebody will come out there and be like, I discovered that arousal and disgust are actually using the same fundamental system. And this is how, and I'd be like, Malcolm came up with all of this years ago. But it also shows that when progressives pretend to not be disgusted by something, when progressives pretend to not be like icked by something, it is just that. They are pretending. This is not real. They are actually even the most tolerant person. And I actually think that this is a bad thing, because what it leads people to believe is I'm accepting of this population, yet I still feel gross when I see them do this. Therefore, there must be something wrong with this population. I mean, that's what disgust evolved in us to instigate, right? Like disgust at like a person with leprosy or something who's like falling apart.
It was about personal safety, and then there's this big problem
Well,
with
that's
people.
just about dead bodies and poo and everything like that. Continue.
Yeah. But then there's also the problem of people intuitively, though it's not always correct, associating disgust with poor morality. And I think, I mean, you see this more with spoken versus unspoken progressive behaviors around race, where like they're like, oh, you know, like other races that are not white are really, really important. We have to protect them, and yet they don't hire them, they don't work with them, they don't live with them. And then, you know, on the other hand, like conservatives don't have anything to say, and yet they hire them, they work with them, they live with them. Like there's.
By the way, to get an idea of how bad this is, there was a recent study done on DEI positions, and only 3.8% of DEI positions are held by Africans.
Classic.
African Americans. This is hilarious. That's well less than their percentage in the population, and it just shows that this is like a white woman thing. The entire field of this progressive urban monoculture is white women. I love the white women for Harris thing. You know, it's
so good. That was such a moment.
Yeah,
amazing.
It turned out that they were the only ones who supported Harris. The Hispanics were not super excited. Blacks voted for her less than Biden. Keep on, blacks voted for her. They did not like Harris.
Well, there was that famous like black journalist meeting during the election when Trump spoke with them. You know, was willing to speak with what he expected to be a fairly antagonistic audience.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh yeah, you know, yeah, now Kamala's black when it's convenient for her. And the progressive and mainstream media rolled that quote out again and again to act as though this was an outrageous thing, but you actually hear chuckles from the audience.
Yeah,
It's not dead silence.
Like,
they're kind of like, I mean,
I know this routine.
yeah, very
Which
interesting.
I completely agree, and I think that was really interesting. So, do you have any other anything changed for you on learning that this disgust response that the progressive men who say they're not experiencing it are most likely lying?
You know, it just reminds me of how my progressive upbringing was, where there were a lot of things that secretly disgust me, and I had to pretend that I was okay with them. And that was really, it was really tough. And it honestly led to poorer mental health because I felt there was a variety of things that I wished I could do something about. Like, I really, I don't want to do this. I don't want to go here. But if I avoid going here, or if I don't do this thing, it will involve an admission, even if it's an unspoken admission, that I have a problem with this thing. And therefore I'm not, like, my values aren't right. I need to like correct myself. And it caused a lot of stress and a lot of cognitive dissonance. And after meeting you and after sort of getting permission to feel what I felt, I just felt so much relief. And we just did another episode on mental health and progressives being poor. And I do think that's a part of it. Is maybe part of the reason why progressive mental health is worse is that there's more of them are forced to lie to themselves in a way that causes cognitive dissonance and distress, and it prevents them from addressing problems that would be fairly easy to address.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anyway, what am I eating for dinner tonight?
Tonight is taquitos.
Thank you. You do great taquitos. Are you going to put some cheese in?
Obviously.
Make it extra sharp.
What cheese do we have? Ooh. I don't know if we have extra sharp cheese.
You can use the cheese I bought at the store.
Yeah, actually, so you didn't realize this, I guess, but you had an open one of those already.
We didn't use some of that.
You think it would be okay? It's a hard cheese, isn't it? I mean, maybe it melts. I don't know how it melts. Do you know how it melts?
It melts.
It does? Okay. I haven't worked with that kind of cheese before. I will finally grate it using a lemon zester.
And even if it doesn't melt, it doesn't need to be grated. I can bite into cheese.
But it's taquitos. If you can't roll them, if like a sharp shard of cheese breaks a delicate corn tortilla.
Whatever you want,
Malcolm, how dare you? Oh, no. This has to be done right. We can't use American cheese, though, so we will find a way. We will find a way.
What a sweet baby.
She's very sweet.
Love you to death.
I love you too. Thanks for being a shot caller. It's one of the things we respect most in this world, and I love it about you. Okay, Speaking of ozone, by the way, I was just listening to this Andrew Huberman podcast episode in which he speaks with a dentist, like a dental specialist, and she uses ozone in her dental treatments, which is really interesting. Like when she's putting sealants on teeth, she'll use ozone to make sure that there's no like bacterial growth or something.
Really? It's like that good at killing bacteria? We recently...
No, it's antiviral, it's antibacterial, it's antifungal. So it's the best. So the reason why people don't use ozone gas more in their homes to remove odors and kill bacteria and bugs and other things is, one, if you have houseplants, they're gone. Two, it can, through prolonged exposure, cause degradation of wires, rubber, and some fabrics. So it's not something you want to use every day, every week. It's maybe once a year in a room, once every 6 months.
But you had a bed bug scare because of a hotel we were at. You had bites that looked like bed bug bites, and then you just ozoned everything after that.
Nuked it.
Deal with it.
Nuke it. Yes. And I'm so glad. Yeah, we bought ourselves an ozone machine on Amazon during the pandemic at the behest of one of our friends who thought that it would be really effective, and we kind of never used it. And I'm so glad we had it. And also our rooms really smell fresh now. So it's great.